everyone, it's Laura, and I'm here belatedly with my August wrap-up. So, yes, I'm wearing my Halloween stuff because it is officially October, and October is my month. Halloween is my holiday, but I do need to catch up on filming videos. So, August, I read 19 books, so I'm going to be quite concise because I don't want a really long video. I hate editing long videos. So I will eventually be posting more in-depth reviews for these individual books, or if there are multiple books in a series, probably I'll have all the series books in one video, and I will post them in the future. So if you want to know more of my thoughts on any of these books, it will eventually be posted on this channel, but for now, I'm going to try and really be as concise as I can. In August, I tackled a bunch of the Bergman Brothers series. There are 7 books total because there are 7 siblings in the Bergman, they call it the Bergman Brothers series, but it's technically 2 sisters and 5 brothers. And I had already read the first book in the series with Willa and what's his name, Ryder. And I didn't really like that book a lot, but with these type of romance books, opinions can vary greatly depending on who the romantic leads are, so I was willing to give the rest of the series a shot. So this month I read 4 of these books. So the first one is the second book in the series, which is Always Only You, which is following Ren and Frankie. And Ren is a professional hockey player, and he is the Bergman brother, and Frankie is the social media coordinator for his hockey team. And it is kind of a rule that she's not supposed to hook up with the players. She has some chronic illness issues, and Ren is basically a lovable teddy bear of a character who's super romantic and has had eyes only for Frankie, but he has to overcome her own insecurities about herself. I liked this so much better than the first book. I gave this 4 stars. Then the third book in the Bergman Brothers series is Ever After Always, and this follows Aiden and Freya Bergman, and this is kind of a second chance romance, which I don't have a lot of experience with, but if this book is anything to go by, I'm not a huge fan of this trope, but we'll see. But they were in the first book introduced as a married couple, and Freya is one of the oldest siblings. I think she might actually be the oldest sibling. I believe it goes her and then Axel. Anyway, so she has been married to Aiden, but they've been drifting apart. And in the beginning of this book, actually technically in the end of the second book, they have a blow up and Aiden shows up in a scene with Ren, and he says that Freya has kicked him out. He is a professor, and I forget Freya's job. I think she might be a physical therapist of some sort, or occupational therapist. Anyway, they are about to try for a baby, and Aiden, he didn't grow up in the best situations, and he has some difficulties with his mindset that he has to be the provider, despite the fact that the Bergman family is very welcoming and obviously will have their back if anything happens. And he can't articulate his feelings very well. Freya is a communicator and wants to talk things out. And I feel like it should have learned by this point in their marriage relationship how to communicate better with each other. And I just didn't really enjoy this book as much as the second book, and I gave this book a 3.5. Then the fourth book is With You Forever, and this is with Axel and Rooney. Rooney is Willa's best friend, Willa from the first book, and Axel is, I believe, like I said, the oldest brother. He is a painter, and he makes a good living off of his commissions. He's very introverted. It is hinted in previous books that he may be autistic, and he doesn't like physical touch as much, and he's very blunt in some of his opinions. And Rooney also has some chronic health conditions. It's been a while, I can't remember if it's IBS or Crohn's, but some digestive issue that she feels very embarrassed about when it causes awkward situations. And Willa has decided to let Rooney use the cabin. They are primarily, the Bergman Brothers books are based in LA, but they have a cabin up in Oregon or Washington, and it is kind of the place that all of the couples go to retreat when they need to think or to reforge their relationships. So Willa decides to send Rooney there for her own issues, but the problem is that the cabin is having some difficulties and needs to undergo some renovations. And Axel actually lives up there most of the time. He's on the same property, but he has his own little cottage. And so he reluctantly allows Rooney to stay there while the renovations are going on for the main cabin, and they grow closer. And I actually like this one a lot. I gave this a 4.25. Then there is Everything for You, which is with Oliver Bergman, one of the brothers. He went through a really hard breakup with his ex-boyfriend in college, so he decides to drop out of school because he has potential to be a pro soccer player. And he initially had gone in with the mindset that he wants to have a degree to fall back on, but after everything, he's like, you know what? I'm just gonna quit school and go be a pro soccer player. He is. And this book takes place a few years after that decision. I want to say like 2 years. And then a new person is added to their team. One of his former soccer idols, Gavin, who is basically at the end of his soccer career. He was over in the UK for years and years and years. And Gavin kind of thinks of this as a demotion by being traded to this team. And he is very gruff and harsh, but he is also openly gay. And so Oliver really respects him and looks up to him. But Gavin does not like Oliver and doesn't understand how he can be so cheerful. But romance does blossom between the two of them. And they kind of help each other through certain issues that they have. I appreciated this book a lot. I did like that they had different sexualities represented because as I've read, at this point I've read all 7 books, they do have a few different characters claim to be bisexual. I can't honestly remember if Oliver is bisexual, but they do just mention him having a boyfriend in college and now Gavin, so I don't know if he's gay or bi or if he's pan or anything, but I do appreciate at least having one of the siblings be in a queer pairing, and gave this book a 4.25 as well. Then I listened to the audiobook from Leah Remini called Troublemaker, and this book was kind of a letdown because I never watched The King of Queens, so I wasn't really familiar with her character or what else she's been in, but I kind of went down the rabbit hole of watching her series on, I want to say it was on Netflix, about escaping Scientology, and with her and Mike Rinder and interviewing all these other ex-Scientologists. And I am not anyone that has ever been religious, and I just find it fascinating learning about different religions in general, but especially some of these that Scientology is very cult-like, and just trying to understand the mindset of how people can be roped in or how people who have grown up in that religion decide to break out from it. And I was excited to learn more about Leah Remini through this book. Only after I started listening did I realize that this book came out in 2014. So it's very outdated. It doesn't have anything new. If anything, my knowledge from her in the Scientology, I forget what the name of that TV show is. I'll put it up here. It's nothing really new or updated from the TV show. I mean, it did go in a little bit more detail about her childhood, which I found interesting, and some more of her experiences. So like, I'm not upset that I listened to it, but it just wasn't all I hoped it would be. So I ended up giving it a 4.25, mainly just because it didn't live up to the expectations I had placed on it. But it was a very interesting look into that world. And then I listened to Swift and Saddled and Lost and Lassoed. And you might be asking, isn't that book 2 and 3 in a series? Did you read book 1? No, I have not. I honestly cannot explain how this happened. I put it on a hold somehow. I think thinking that Swift and Saddled, I didn't realize Done and Dusted was the first book for whatever reason. And it has a longer hold time, probably because it's the first book in a series and more people were trying to listen to it on Libby. And honestly, I don't know if this is a hot take. I think these covers are ugly. So it's not something that I wanted to physically read. So I'm just going by the audiobook experience with this. So as soon as I realized my mistake, I put a hold for Done and Dusted, and it's going to be a while until that comes in. I'll probably end up finishing the 4th book in the series before I go back to the first one. It doesn't really matter since they're interconnected romances again, but I still like to just read things in order so that I see the progression when the original characters eventually pop up in the other books. But this is a one situation where the hold came up and I figured I might as well listen to it. So anyway, I listened to Swift and Saddled, and this is about Ada Hart and Weston Ryder. And Ada had just got out of basically an emotionally abusive relationship with someone she thought she was going to marry, and he turns out to be a scumbag. So she is trying to make a name for herself as an interior designer. So she takes on this project for Weston's family ranch, Rebel Blue Ranch. Sorry, I can't say that name very fast. And they are a working cattle ranch, but they have hopes of renovating the old farmhouse to kind of make it a location to hold events at, or for corporate retreats, or just for people who want to get out and experience the countryside and the slower pace of life. So they hire Ada, and she comes. She was familiar with one of the other characters, I forget her name, that is kind of from that town. They knew each other in college, so that's how she got recommended this job. And Weston is someone who, he's not the oldest son, so he kind of wants to distinguish himself in his family. And I enjoyed the romance, but it wasn't anything that particularly stood out for me as super special. I gave it a 4. And the third book, Lost and Lassoed, is about Teddy Anderson and Gus Ryder, who is the older brother of Weston. And he feels a lot of pressure to run the ranch and thrive, basically. And he also has a 6-year-old daughter. And Teddy, unfortunately, is in between jobs. She thought she was all set, but turns out her job is being bought out and she is looking for an opportunity. So reluctantly, Gus agrees to having her watch his daughter while he's out taking care of the ranch for the summer. So they bond, they get closer. They've always had chemistry. They butt heads a lot because Teddy's more of a free spirit. Gus is very rigid. But for me, I know that it is very different in multiple ways, but just having read Elsie Silver's books more recently, it did give me kind of Heartless vibes. And between the two, I prefer Heartless. So this book I gave a 4.25. I did like it more than Swift and Saddled, but looking back, I might have to change some of these ratings to better, I don't know. Anyway, 4.25 at least for now. Then I read Under the Whispering Door by T.J. Klune. This is the final book of his that I own. And I, at first, was very hesitant about this book because this book follows Wallace, and he is not a very likable character at first, but he dies. And so this is a story about him going, he's collected by a reaper, and then he's brought to kind of this halfway house of death where he meets Hugo, who's supposed to kind of be his guide to the afterlife. And because I've discovered about myself that I kind of need the main character to be likable for me to enjoy books, I know not everyone has that same mindset, but for me, at least that's what I've been finding to be true more than not. I was worried, but this book really got me by the end. I cried when reading it towards the end.
This book, okay, that hit harder than I thought.
And I found it very touching, and I ended up giving this book 5 stars. Then I read The Scarlet Alchemist. This was a random book that I bought because some other book I bought on Pango, this was being sold by the same seller as that book, and it was a very lovely copy. So I decided to buy it at the same time and give it a read. And this book was kind of hard for me to get into at first. And it's about, I'm sorry, this is based on Chinese, so I apologize if I butcher her name, but Zilan. And she wants to be a royal alchemist. That is an unusual path for a female, and her cousins are trying to become government workers because they could really use the increase in finances because her parents have died, and she has been living with her aunt and uncle and her 2 cousins, and they are barely eking an existence out in the rural countryside. So she wants to become an alchemist because she has a talent for it, and her cousins, they want to become I forget the official term for it now, but some sort of like scholar, but they have to undergo government testing. They have to pass a test in their province, and then if they pass, there's only a limited number, they will go for further training and testing in the capital that they have to pass before they get their positions. So she's looked down upon, one, for being a woman, and then two, for basically being a country bumpkin. And like I said, it was a little hard for me to get into at first. The more and more I got into it, I was a little skeptical about how anything good could happen in this book, because it seemed like one shoe would drop and then another awful thing would happen. And I don't remember, I think this is going to be a duology, so I am going to listen to the second book only in audio, because I ended up liking the book once I got into it. It was a very quick read. I gave it a 4, and again, as with a lot of different stories, I think my overall thoughts will be dependent on how the series completes, because honestly, I thought for the longest time that this was going to be a standalone. So much wrapped up in this book that it honestly could have been. So based on where I know the second book is going, I'm curious if it's going to be a situation where I think the second book shouldn't exist and it should have just been a standalone that fully wrapped up in this book, or if it will just further expand the world and kind of the lore behind it. So I gave this book a 4, and I think, like I said, ultimately my thoughts will depend on the follow-up. Then I read Scythe, and this book, for the longest time, it intrigued me. I've seen it on so many people's shelves, but I was hesitant to pick it up because it is YA, and I have pretty much determined that I am beyond my YA years, and I didn't know how much enjoyment I could truly get from it. But this is a world in the future where we've cured death, and they have to have people that act as scythes to actually control the population, and that people can just kind of at a certain point decide that they want to reset their age. And so you have families where they have grandparents that are physically younger than their grandkids, and it's just a very interesting take on society. So I figured, I saw it at the used bookstore when I went on one trip, and I figured it was a sign to pick it up and give it a shot. So I listened to it, and it was not at all what I expected it to be. It was different in so many different ways. It was very intriguing. The world setup was so interesting, and just to see the characters' thoughts about the age of mortality, as they call it, of where so many people would die in plane crashes and school shootings and etc., and how different things are here. It was a very interesting read, and to find out that some things can ruin any system, just like lust for power or people's natural tendencies to not be able to accept good things, and they have to just kind of create drama and stir the pot. And I am super eager to see where the rest of this series goes, especially with how this book ended. I gave this 5 stars. Then I listened to the audiobook of Caught Up, which is the 3rd book in the Windy City series. And this book features Kai. He was in the same building as the couple from the 2nd book. I forget their names now. And he is a single dad, and he is a baseball pitcher. I believe he's a pitcher. And he is looking for a new nanny because he's very particular in who he hires and how he wants things to be. He's borderline too controlling, honestly. So in comes Miller. She is a very famous chef, and she is struggling under the weight of expectations after winning a prestigious award. And she's kind of finding a lack of inspiration in her own work. So she decides to take the summer off, and she ends up doing a favor for her father, who is Kai's agent, and be Kai's new nanny. So he can't fire her, and she can't have a personal relationship with him, but obviously sparks fly. And I actually liked this book quite a lot. I gave this a 4.25. I like it more than Mile High. I think it's kind of about the same as The Right Move. What was this book to? So 4.25. And then I went in to read the 4th book, Play Along. The only reason I don't own the 3rd book is I found this at the used bookstore. They didn't have a copy of Caught Up, and I'm trying not to buy books physically right now. So I might eventually resort to that when I have more room on my shelves for it. But for right now, I do own Play Along. And this is with Kennedy and Isaiah. Isaiah is the shortstop on the baseball team, and Kennedy is one of the trainers for the baseball team. She was applying to be one of the doctors, but unfortunately the lead doctor was sexist and he had hired her. But when she showed up and he saw that she was female, he basically said, I can only offer you the position of trainer. If that's not good enough for you, then get out. And so she was not excited to take less pay, but she had already found a place to live and relocated her life for this job. So she just said, fine. And she's been dealing with the sexist lead doctor. Isaiah had overheard the confrontation between the two of them. And so he's the only one that kind of knows the truth behind Kennedy because she swore him to secrecy. And he's flirted with her relentlessly since day one. But she just thinks it's all a big joke because that's the type of guy he is and that he's a playboy. But he basically would drop everything if he knew that she gave him the time of day, but she's also been engaged forever. So when you find out at the beginning of this book that she is officially single, that her engagement ring has disappeared, he basically does his best to prove that he has real legitimate feelings for her and shoot his shot. And this book is interesting because Kai is his brother, so there's an interesting dynamic in their relationship. After book 3, you got a certain view of Isaiah, and then seeing him when you're in his head, it's interesting in this book. I gave this book a 4.5. Then I read The Soulmate Equation. This is a book that has been on my shelves for ages and ages and ages. And I honestly don't know why I put it off for so long. It sounded so interesting about a girl who basically has decided to give up on dating, but then ends up agreeing to be part of this beta program for a new app where they are basically going to do genetic testing and then match you based on your genetics with your perfect match. And she ends up being matched with the creator of the app and saying you have different tiers of match. So, like bronze, silver, gold, platinum, diamond, whatever. And her and the creator of the app are supposed to be a diamond match. And because they're, like I said, are just kind of doing beta testing and they're going to be launching publicly in a few months' time, everyone surrounding this app is super excited because so far there had only been 2 diamond matches from people that they've tested that have been married for years and years. So having someone and tracing their relationship from day one with this rating to see how legitimate this app and this method of dating could be it was such a novel idea. So I honestly was so intrigued by it, and I don't know why it took me so long to pick it up, but I ended up really liking this for the most part. It did have its flaws, but I gave it a 4.25, and there is something else in this universe with Jessica, the female lead, with her best friend. So I am curious. Her best friend just seems like a character. I don't know how much I'll enjoy a book in her perspective, but at least I did really enjoy this one. Then I finally continued on in that time I was reincarnated as a slime light novel with volume 7. And this book follows basically the first third or so of season 3, I want to say, of the anime, because this is basically after Walpurgis with the demon lords and then the issues with Hinata and the Western Holy Church and Pharmas again, and there's a lot of meetings, but it was interesting kind of reading again and seeing things fleshed out even more from the anime and the slight changes. I ended up giving this a 4. Then I read The House Witch. I basically picked this up at the used bookstore based on the cover and vibes alone because the cover drew my attention. And then this is about Finley Ashelwyn, who is basically a house witch, and he goes to be the new chef in the king's palace in his country, and they're on the brink of war with a neighboring country. He is hiding the fact that he's a house witch because it's kind of looked down upon by other witches. They have to be registered by council. There are people that are like water witches and fire witches, and you have differing strengths, and he is looked down upon because basically any area that he considers home, he can have his powers in that area, and the more people that happily inhabit his home, the more powerful he is. But take him out of his home environment and he's basically just a normal person. So he's been looked down upon in his entire life, and he doesn't want that shame, so he doesn't let other people know. But this is I really enjoyed this book, but I feel like if you're someone that has to have a lot of big battles or a lot of large events, it was more of a slice of life type fantasy for a lot of it. There was political intrigue and there was a lot of kind of politicking because of the pending war with a neighboring country and everything. So it's definitely not for everyone, but I actually really liked this. I gave it a 4.5. I see that there are at least 2 sequels that I'm aware of, and I will be listening to them before I buy them, unless they might be at the used bookstore when I go next time. But I am curious to see how the story progresses, and maybe some of the sequels might be more action-packed. But if they stay kind of low stakes, more slice of life like this book, I'm still okay with that because I did really enjoy this book overall. So 4.5. Then I started on the Expanse series with Leviathan Wakes. I picked this up at the used bookstore because I've heard a lot about it, and I've always been a sci-fi person, so I was interested in reading more in the genre, and this is one of the more well-known series. I was kind of scared when I just realized how many books are in this series, though. I want to say it's something like 11 main books, and then there are certain like in-between novellas, I want to say. I don't know, but it was definitely more complicated than I expected because you definitely jump right into the story, but it was crazy trying to get used to a world where multiple places have been colonized. Mars has been colonized. The asteroid belt has been colonized, and there are different factions between them and Earth. And people based on where they grew up, like if you grew up in the asteroid belt with artificial gravity, that they don't have it set to Earth's gravity, they grow taller and lankier. Just that's how they develop in that environment. Like it was very interesting how there's prejudices based on where you come from. And then the main overarching issue in this book of this poor crew trying to figure out what the heck is going on, and a detective who is dealing with his own issues, and he ends up kind of joining in, but he's jaded at this point. It was very not what I expected, but I still enjoyed it, and I will be continuing in the series. And eventually I'd like to take a look at the TV show, but I don't want anything spoiled, and I don't want to associate those actors with the characters yet, so I haven't looked at any of that. But I gave this book a 4. Then I read Exodus Quest, basically because this is, again, a book that I picked up and has been on my shelves for ages, and it feels just very like the junk food of books that you could pick up at any airport bookstore. And it was available for immediate listening on Libby, so one day when I just said, let's just listen to it. So I listened to it, and I don't even remember what it's about. Oh yeah, Alexandria Egyptologist Daniel Knox stumbles across the Dead Sea Scroll jar, and oh yeah, he gets kind of embroiled in a situation, and one of his previous co-workers, Gail, that they have kind of romantic feelings for each other, she gets kidnapped and he has to kind of save her, but he's avoiding the police because they think he killed a man. It was interesting for what it was. I really like anything to do with Egypt. I found it interesting, but it was very detailed and it was very based on religion, and people are trying to do a cover-up for certain things that were found because it doesn't match up with their beliefs of how religion works. And again, I'm not a religious person, so that part kind of went over my head, and I gave it a 3. I'm glad I gave it a read, but I will be unhauling this, passing it along for someone else to enjoy. It's not something, like I said, even in this short time, I really kind of forgot about what it was about, and it's nothing that really stuck out to me, so I don't plan on rereading it. Nothing I'm going to really recommend to anybody else, so it's not going to take up room on my shelf. And then I listened to Witch Please, which is the first in a series called Fix It Witches. And the reason I was turned on to this is because I thought at first when I picked this up that it was part of the same series as The Only Purple House in Town. But it turns out that this is a trilogy of interconnected books, and it's in the same universe and town as The Only Purple House in Town, but it's not necessarily part of the same series. But at this point, I'm in it, so I figured at this point in time when I'm recording this, I've already listened to book 2 in this series, so I might as well just listen to the third one. This is a book about Danica Waterhouse, and she runs a shop with her cousin. It's called Fix It Witches, and they are techno witches. They're witches and they are part of this community. There's a lot of witches in this community. There are two main covens and there are different types of your powers. And people just basically specialize in their type of witchcraft. And so they're techno wizards. I forgot the official term that they use, but they basically can like hold a cell phone if it's broken, just figure out what's wrong with it, focus, concentrate, and fix it. And so they've created a business with that. So she goes to fix the oven of a baker down the street, Titus, and they're drawn to each other and a romance forms. But the rules in this world is that you can't let a human know that you're a witch. You can't let them know. So she's getting a lot of pressure from her grandmother, who is the matriarch of the family, that she has to continue the strong bloodline of witches and be in a romantic relationship with another fellow witch. She's really drawn to Titus, but she wonders how that would work if she can never tell him this part about her. And there also is family lore that if she marries a human like her mother did, that she would lose her magical powers. When it's such a big part of her, it's a lot to work on. So overall, it was all right. I gave it a 4. I liked certain parts of it. Other parts, I wish that they had fleshed out a bit more, but like I said, I've already read book 2 and I plan on reading book 3, so it wasn't too bad, but I will not be buying this for my shelves. Then the last book I read was Fragile Sanctuary. I finally started this series because I bought them a while ago, the first 4 books I want to say, because I was getting free shipping, so I bought 4 books in a series where I'm normally very good about only buying the first in a series to see if I like it. So this is about Rose, who is basically coming back to her hometown to deal finally with the aftermath of a family tragedy. When she was young, a preteen, her family had just moved to the area and bought this big Victorian house. Her mom had decorated it, made it their own, and then there was a fire and she lost her parents and her sister. So she decided to finally tackle that huge emotional hurdle, come back and bring the house back to life. And she runs into Anson, who's basically kind of one of the main points of contact on the restoration. He's not the like foreman, but he's basically the fire damage expert on the construction crew, but he has his own shady past that he's dealing with, and so he's trying to avoid any big human ties with anyone. Despite Rose wanting to get close to him and being all friendly and chipper, he tries to maintain his distance. This was not exactly like what I expected. I've seen people say that it was very serious and it was different from other romance books, and it was. I mean, there's a serial killer in this book, which is not at all what I was expecting, but it was definitely interesting. I ended up giving this a 4.25. I'll be curious to see where the other books go, because Rose was basically taken in by her best friend's family. She has a lot of basically foster brothers and sisters. She considers them basically like the real siblings to her, and so I think the other books are with those siblings, so I'll be curious to see. There are 6 books in total in this series. I don't remember if the 6th one is out already or if it's coming out real soon, but it's about to be finished. So I do want to read the books that I own to see if I am curious in buying myself the 5th and 6th books. So I gave this book a 4.25. So overall, here are my reading stats for the month. I read 19 books, or 7,229 pages, 9 audiobooks. I did the immersion or tandem reading, and 1 light novel. Here are the breakdown of the moods. And here's a breakdown of the genres. So that's it for this video. This was a lot longer than I anticipated it to be. I will really have to cut it down for the month of September wrap up because I read 27 books in that month. So I'm awful at keeping things brief, but I will see you in the next video. Bye.